And the Pentagon has reportedly notified members of Congress that an $80 billion supplemental request to cover the cost of the war in Iran is headed their way. We knew it was coming, but this is a big price tag. Deputy Defense Secretary Stephen Feinberg first informed lawmakers last week that the request had been sent to the Office of Management and Budget. While the White House has yet to pass along the request to Congress, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was on Capitol Hill yesterday making the rounds. Pentagon leaders have warned they could run out of money this summer without a new wartime spending bill, meaning they would have to start cutting back on training exercises and other priorities. This request will likely face an uphill battle, though, as many Democrats continue to protest the use of funds for a war they say Trump illegally started without congressional approval. It's worth noting the White House has already requested $1.5 trillion for the Pentagon in the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. That's up nearly 50% from last year. But this, of course, would be a supplemental on top of their funding for this current year, not next fiscal year.
What's good, people? Dr. John Podcast is back again. J.D. Vance, once hailed as Trump's heir and the future of the MAGA movement, has seen that narrative collapse completely. Just a couple of years in, Republican power players are openly discussing replacing him, Trump is publicly throwing him under the bus, and Vance has turned from the chosen one into a political liability. Here's the craziest part about this entire situation. Vance's popularity never even started strong. When he was picked as the running mate, CNN polling found that he had a net favorability rating of -6. That means more people disliked him than liked him. And that was at the very beginning, when there was supposed to be a honeymoon period where voters were just meeting him for the first time.
Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance is now the public face of President Trump's Iran deal, despite reportedly opposing the war in private. While fresh talks in Switzerland produced an interim agreement allowing UN nuclear inspectors back into Iran, key issues, including Tehran's nuclear program, remain unresolved. At this point, critics from both parties are attacking the deal. One former senior administration official told MS Now it was, quote, a complete capitulation to Iran, adding, that's just salesmanship. That's putting lipstick on a very ugly pig. Vance insists the agreement is an historic step toward avoiding what he calls forever wars. But negotiations remain fragile, with future talks expected. Want to bring in the co-author of that great new reporting, MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor. Jake, you're touching on, I think, one of the more fascinating dynamics here, the fact that the vice president, from the very beginning of this conflict, was reported as being against going into Iran, and yet now here he is, so central to the negotiations, doing the talks in Switzerland, and also very much the public face of this, in part because of a book tour that was timed without the Iran war in mind, but very much became him answering questions about this memorandum of understanding.
He was described as the least popular vice presidential nominee since 1980, when he was first rolled out to the public. That's how bad it was right from the start. Republican strategists were already deeply worried that his hardline positions on abortion and his controversial comments about women and childless cat ladies would damage the ticket in the suburbs and among moderate voters. They knew he was a problem before the campaign even really got going. But instead of getting better, it got worse, way worse, much worse. Vance kept making unforced errors. He kept saying controversial things. He kept taking positions that made people uncomfortable. And the more voters saw of him, the more unpopular he became. Republican insiders started talking as early as July 2024 about whether Trump might just dump him from the ticket entirely because he was dragging down the presidential ticket so badly.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating dynamic that exists here for Vice President Vance. I mean, almost a dozen White House officials and former officials have told us how much Vice President Vance dissented and was against this war initially. He now leads the charge in negotiations. He became the face of the negotiations. I had multiple officials tell me the book tour Iran kind of co-opt tour across media last week was not intended, but ended up being the case. But multiple officials told me and my colleague David Rode how surprised they were that Vance has emerged as the individual to lead on this. One White House official told me that Rubio kind of smarted his way, kind of didn't raise his hand at the right moments because he didn't think it was possible to have a really successful outcome here that looked positively for the White House when it comes to reaching a peace deal with Iran. And so he kind of attempted to almost swerve or avoid it. This official and others told me that Vance believed real success could actually be achieved here. And a kind of interesting note here, Ali, is we've talked about how much Vance has dissented.
These were Republicans saying this. These were Trump's own people saying that Vance was a huge problem. One GOP senator told reporters it was pretty generally thought inside the party that Trump's son and Tucker Carlson had pushed Trump into picking Vance and that it wasn't coming from his core campaign advisors. That meant Vance was never fully embraced by the party establishment. He was always seen as someone who was forced on the ticket rather than being the obvious choice. And the consensus was clear. Trump probably wouldn't dump Vance from the ticket because that would mean admitting a huge mistake publicly. But Republicans were already saying that Vance was a huge drag on the GOP ticket and that things were only going to get worse going forward. They were already planning for a future without him. They were already thinking about what comes next. And now we're seeing that play out in real time.
The war initially, they actually made the point that because of how much strain President Trump is under right now, economically, because of how much he needs to get out of this war now, it's actually kind of caught up the president to where Vice President Vance has been all along, which is never wanting to be in this war. And so it creates this really interesting dynamic. But the most illustrative moment, I think, for this whole entire interesting representation of who is ending the war in terms from the White House perspective was the moment in Switzerland over the weekend where Vice President Vance is saying, projecting to the press and to the Iranian press as well as the U.S. and across the globe, saying there's great progress to be made. We're going to turn over a new leaf with Iran. And then literally seconds later, President Trump posting on Truth Social new threats to begin strikes again if necessary, just showing that ultimately Vice President Vance can be the lead voice on this, but President Trump from thousands of miles away, the power of the pen still really ultimately makes the decisions here.
Trump himself has been throwing Vance under the bus constantly. On Fox News, when asked directly if Vance is his successor, Trump wouldn't commit to it. He waffled. He dodged the question. He wouldn't say what you'd expect him to say if Vance was actually the chosen one. During the abortion debate, Trump publicly disavowed Vance's position on federal abortion bans. Trump said he wouldn't sign something that Vance said he would sign. Trump was directly contradicting his own vice president in public on television in front of millions of people. That's not what you do to someone you're grooming to be your successor. That's what you do when you're signaling that someone is expendable. That's what you do when you're preparing the ground to get rid of them. And now other Republicans are openly positioning themselves as alternatives. Josh Hawley, a MAGA senator from Missouri, just launched a new anti-abortion group called the Love Life Initiative. Everyone knows this is a direct challenge to Vance. This is Hawley building his own power base. This is Hawley positioning himself as a harder line alternative to Vance on abortion. The White House was reportedly raging at Hawley for doing this. They knew what he was really doing, and Hawley wasn't alone. Ted Cruz and Rand Paul are also being watched as potential 2028 candidates. These are all senators who are positioning themselves as alternatives to Vance for the future of the Republican Party. But here's where it gets really wild. There are even conservative strategists floating more extreme scenarios. One conservative writer named Scott McConnell actually proposed that Vance should use the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from power if things get bad enough. McConnell was arguing that Vance should back a 25th Amendment transition and potentially become president himself. That's how fractured the party is. Some Republicans want to use Vance to oust Trump. Other Republicans want to oust Vance to protect Trump and clear space for their own ambitions. Vance is caught in the middle of a civil war inside his own party, and he's losing. This is the story of how someone goes from being the chosen one to being a total liability in just a couple of years. This is the story of how Trump picks someone and then abandons them when they become unpopular. This is the story of how the Republican Party eats its own. And it's all happening right now in real time while Vance is still vice president serving in the administration. What's particularly striking about this moment is how fast everything changed. Vance didn't have years of slowly declining influence. He didn't gradually lose support over time. He became immediately unpopular when he was introduced to voters and has only gotten worse since then. That's remarkable. That's a historic failure for someone in his position. And now the whole Republican Party is positioning itself for a future without him. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. They're openly floating scenarios where Vance is removed or replaced or marginalized. This is what a complete political collapse looks like in real time. The conventional wisdom in politics is that new running mates get a polling bump. They get introduced to voters. Voters form positive impressions. But Vance didn't get that bump. In fact, he started at negative. He started with more people disliking him than liking him. That's almost unheard of in American politics. That suggests something about him is fundamentally unpopular with voters at a deep level. Republican strategists were deeply worried about this from the very beginning. They understood that Vance's controversial comments about women could alienate suburban voters and moderate voters who were crucial to winning the general election. They understood that his hardline abortion stance could hurt the ticket in states where abortion rights were popular with voters. They understood that he was damaged goods from the moment he was picked. Let me take you deeper into what's actually happening behind the scenes, because the reporting about what's going on inside Republican leadership circles is absolutely damning. According to detailed reporting from multiple outlets covering the Republican Party closely, Vance's problems started immediately when he was picked as the running mate. Republican strategists were already talking about ways to get rid of him before the 2024 election was even completely over. One GOP senator told reporters it was pretty generally thought inside the party that Trump's family members and Tucker Carlson had pushed Trump into picking Vance against his own instincts. This story circulated repeatedly inside Republican circles and became accepted wisdom. It became conventional understanding that Vance wasn't Trump's choice at all, but rather someone he was pressured into picking by people close to him. That's a terrible way to start as the chosen heir to a political movement. If people think you were forced on the ticket rather than being the obvious choice, you've already lost credibility before you even start. The reporting also made abundantly clear that Trump probably wouldn't actually dump Vance from the ticket, because doing so would be admitting a massive, humiliating political mistake. Firing your vice president midterm would look terrible. It would raise all kinds of serious questions about Trump's political judgment. It would create enormous chaos inside the administration. So instead of actually getting rid of him, Republicans were stuck with Vance as their vice president, even though many of them privately saw him as a drag on their political future and the party's electoral prospects. But that didn't stop them from planning extensively for a world without him. Conservative strategist Scott McConnell actually wrote out a detailed, specific proposal for exactly how Vance could become president using constitutional mechanisms. McConnell argued that if things got bad enough, if Trump's Iran war went completely wrong, if domestic chaos got worse, if the constitutional crisis got much deeper, Vance should back a 25th Amendment transition to remove Trump from office. McConnell was essentially telling Vance to use the constitutional process to assume power. McConnell was urging Vance to declare your backing for a 25th Amendment transition and position himself to potentially become president. The proposal was that Vance would then serve as a transitional president, pick an anti-war Democrat like Chris Murphy as vice president to help heal divisions, and promise not to run in 2028. In other words, Vance would become president for a short time to clean up Trump's mess and then voluntarily step aside. This kind of constitutional coup scenario shows just how chaotic and fractured Republican thinking has become at the highest levels of the party and among conservative intellectuals. You've got factions within the party that want completely different things. Some Republicans want to use Vance to oust Trump and seize power for themselves. Other Republicans want to completely get rid of Vance and clear the field for their own ambitions and presidential aspirations. And Trump himself is signaling constantly that Vance is expendable and replaceable. It's a complete mess. It's a party that doesn't have any coherent strategy for the future. It's a party that's tearing itself apart, fighting over power and succession while the country faces real problems. The rival positioning is happening openly and aggressively now. Josh Hawley, the MAGA senator from Missouri, just launched something called the Love Life Initiative. On the surface, it's supposed to be an anti-abortion group for grassroots organizing and voter mobilization. But everyone in Republican politics understands exactly what it really is. It's a vehicle for Hawley to build his own political power base and directly challenge Vance for the 2028 nomination. Hawley is positioning himself as a more hardline and traditional alternative to Vance on abortion and social issues generally. He's saying, you want someone tough on abortion? I'm your guy. You don't need Vance, you can have me instead. The White House was reportedly absolutely furious about this initiative. They understood immediately what Hawley was doing. They understood that he was directly and explicitly challenging Vance's position in the party and potentially his future viability as a national candidate. And Hawley isn't the only one doing this. Ted Cruz and Rand Paul are also being closely watched as potential 2028 candidates by political observers and strategists. These are all established senators with their own power bases. They're all actively and strategically positioning themselves as alternatives to Vance for the future leadership of the movement. The message from all of them is crystal clear. Vance isn't inevitable. Vance isn't the chosen one. Vance isn't destiny. There are other people who might be significantly better suited to carry the MAGA banner forward into the next decade. Even Vance's home base in Ohio isn't safe anymore going forward. Biotech entrepreneur and venture capitalist Vivek Ramaswamy has surfaced as a potential candidate for Vance's Ohio Senate seat. That means if Vance's national standing collapses completely at some point, he might not even be able to hold on to his Senate seat when he faces re-election. He could be challenged in his home state by a rising political entrepreneur like Ramaswamy, who has his own platform and his own base of support. That's how badly his position has deteriorated in just a short time. He's being undercut from above by Trump himself. He's being squeezed from the side by rivals like Hawley, Cruz, and Paul. And now he's even being threatened from below with potential serious challenges in his own home state. And then there are all the missteps and setbacks that have exposed the limits of Vance's political influence and power. He's flopped on endorsements of candidates who didn't win. He's been wrong on major policy questions and predictions. He's failed to deliver on promises to the base. He's become increasingly isolated within Republican leadership circles and the wider party. The more time passes, the more it becomes absolutely clear that Vance is not an emerging figure. He's a declining figure. He's not someone who's going to be leading the party into the future. He's someone who peaked way too early and is now watching his position deteriorate in real time. What makes this situation so remarkable is the speed of the collapse. Vance wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be the future. He was supposed to be the guy who would unify the party and carry the movement forward. Instead, he's become a cautionary tale about what happens when you hitch your wagon to a political figure who treats everyone as expendable. Trump has made it abundantly clear that he doesn't see Vance as a long-term partner. He sees Vance as a temporary tool. And the moment Vance stopped being useful, Trump started signaling that it was time to move on. The party is following Trump's lead. The ambitious senators who want to be president are positioning themselves. The strategists who want to shape the future of the movement are floating scenarios. The donors who want to back a winner are looking elsewhere. Vance is being isolated from all sides. He's losing support from above, from below, and from the sides. There's no constituency that's fighting for him. There's no faction that's defending him. There's no powerful ally that's standing up for him. He's alone, and that's the most dangerous place to be in Republican politics right now. Now let me bring all of this together and explain why this matters so much for American politics. This story tells us something really important about the Republican Party and the state of American politics right now. First, J.D. Vance was supposed to be the future of the entire movement. He was supposed to be the young, articulate face of MAGA. He was supposed to be the guy who would carry Trumpism forward into the next generation successfully. He was supposed to be the heir apparent. That was the entire narrative and story being sold when Trump picked him as vice president. But that narrative has completely collapsed and fallen apart in just a couple of years. He's become such a political liability that Republican power players are openly discussing how to get rid of him, how to replace him, how to marginalize him completely. That's a stunning reversal of fortune. That's a spectacular and rapid failure of epic proportions. Second, Trump himself is directly responsible for this disaster and this failure. Trump picked Vance. Trump chose him as the running mate. Trump put him in this position and in the public eye. And now Trump is publicly throwing him under the bus repeatedly. Trump is contradicting him on policy issues. Trump is signaling loudly that he's expendable and replaceable. Trump is refusing to call him his successor when directly asked. This is exactly what Trump does when he's done with someone. This is how Trump signals that someone is no longer useful to him. Vance was supposed to be Trump's protege and his heir, but Trump treats him like he's expendable. Trump doesn't seem to care about destroying Vance's political future as long as it helps Trump politically in the moment. Third, this reveals a Republican Party that has no coherent plan for the future whatsoever. Instead of uniting behind a clear successor and building toward a coherent vision, the party is tearing itself apart internally. You've got different factions pulling in different directions simultaneously. You've got people wanting to use Vance to oust Trump. You've got people wanting to get rid of Vance entirely and install someone else. You've got senators like Hawley and Cruz positioning themselves as alternatives to Vance. You've got strategists floating all kinds of schemes and plots. It's chaos, it's dysfunction. It's a party that's more interested in internal warfare than in actually building something for the future. Fourth, the fact that Vance's unpopularity was so immediate and so severe suggests that there's something fundamentally wrong with his political brand and appeal. This isn't just about bad luck or bad timing or poor campaign strategy. This is about the fact that voters look at Vance and they don't like what they see. They see someone who's weird. They see someone who's saying offensive things about women. They see someone who's extreme on various issues. They see someone who doesn't fit with the rest of the party. And that's a problem that can't be fixed with better messaging or better campaign strategy. That's a problem that's baked into who Vance is as a person and politician. Fifth, Trump's public disavowal of Vance is particularly telling and revealing about what's really happening. When Trump contradicted Vance on abortion, when Trump refused to call him his successor when directly asked by reporters, when Trump threw him under the bus on television, those moments show that Trump has given up on Vance completely. Trump is signaling to the party that it's okay to move on from Vance. Trump has given explicit permission for other Republicans to start planning for a post-Vance future, and they're taking that permission and running with it. They're circling, they're plotting, they're positioning themselves as alternatives. Trump has essentially cut Vance loose, and the party is following his lead immediately. Now, what does this mean going forward? It means Vance's political future is in very serious doubt. He's vice president right now, so he has the title, but he's lost the support of his own party. He's lost the backing of Trump. He's lost the confidence of Republican strategists and operatives. He's become a liability instead of an asset. If the midterms go badly, if Trump's presidency continues to collapse further, if things get worse domestically or internationally, Vance is going to be blamed. Vance is going to be the scapegoat, and Republican power players are already positioning themselves to distance themselves from him. The 2028 succession fight is going to be absolutely brutal inside the Republican Party. You've got different factions with different candidates. You've got Trump family members who might want to run. You've got senators like Hawley, Cruz, and Paul already building their own power bases. You've got ideological factions who want completely different things. There's no clear consensus about who should be the heir. There's no clear vision for what the party should stand for. And Vance is caught in the middle of all of this, losing ground every single day as weeks and months pass. He started as the chosen one with Trump's public backing and endorsement. He's becoming the person that everyone wants to get rid of and move past. He started as the future of the entire movement. He's becoming the past. The Republican Party is moving on without him completely. This is what happens when you build your entire political identity and career on being someone else's heir. When that person decides you're not useful anymore, you have nothing left to stand on. Vance hitched his wagon to Trump. He built his political brand as Trump's chosen successor. And when Trump decided Vance was a liability, Vance became radioactive. He became someone that Republicans want to distance themselves from. He became someone that other ambitious politicians want to run against. He became expendable. And that's the ultimate lesson here. In Trump's orbit, nobody is indispensable. Nobody is irreplaceable. Nobody is truly secure. You're only as useful as your last election result. You're only as relevant as Trump's current mood towards you. The moment you become a problem instead of an asset, you become expendable. You can be discarded. You can be abandoned. You can be thrown under the bus. And that's exactly what's happening to J.D. Vance right now. The stories coming out of Republican circles are absolutely damning. The reporting shows a party that has already moved on from Vance, even while he's still serving as vice president. The strategists are looking at other candidates. The senators are positioning themselves. The donors are looking elsewhere. The media is writing the obituary for his political future. And Trump is leading the charge, publicly signaling that Vance is no longer useful. It's a complete and total collapse, and it's happening right in front of us. This is what a political implosion looks like in real time. This is what happens when a political figure who was supposed to be the future becomes a liability instead. This is what happens when a movement that was supposed to be unified falls into chaos and internal warfare. And this is what happens when you tie your entire political future to someone who treats everyone as expendable. Vance is learning that lesson the hard way, and his political career may never recover. The Republican Party is now in a state of complete chaos when it comes to succession. There's no clear heir. There's no consensus candidate. There's no unified vision for the future. And the infighting is only going to get worse as 2028 approaches. The factions are already forming. The candidates are already positioning. The donors are already choosing sides. And Vance, who was supposed to be the one who brought it all together, is now the one who is being left behind. This story is far from over. The 2028 fight is going to be brutal, and Vance is going to be caught right in the middle of it, fighting for relevance, fighting for survival, fighting to prove that he still has a future in a party that has already decided to move on. But right now, at this moment, the trajectory is clear. Vance is being thrown under the bus, the party is moving on, and his political future is in very serious doubt.